Hi, fourth graders. We're here to make our relief maps today. The one thing you're going to do is gather your supplies. So you should have your colored map that we made 2 weeks ago. You're going to want that in front of you. You also should have your salt dough that you made hopefully just within the last couple days. And you have a template that was in your packet that you're going to want. You're going to want this cut out. And then you're going to want to either use cardboard or plywood, a type of plywood to use. We like using the plywood or a thin sheet of wood better than the cardboard because it lasts longer, but whatever you have will work. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your template and cut it out and trace it with a marker onto your plywood or onto your cardboard. Okay, let's talk about your salt dough real quick. Hopefully you've made your salt dough within the last couple days. If you made it, a week ago, it probably isn't the best salt dough to make. So just within 1 to 2 days of doing your map, you're gonna wanna have your salt dough done. Your salt dough should look and feel a lot like Play-Doh. When I squish it, it shouldn't be too sticky. When I touch it with my hands, you notice that there's not any going onto my hands. Sometimes when kids make salt dough, it's more like slime and it sticks to their hands. And if that's the case, it's gonna be really hard for you to make it on with your map. So if it's too sticky, you can always add a little bit more flour to it. And if it feels super crumbly, you're gonna want, that means you don't have enough moisture and you're gonna wanna add a little bit more water to it. The best salt dough recipe is the one that we sent out to you to use. That is the one we've had the best success with. So when you start your map, you're gonna wanna work with small pieces. So go ahead and tear off a small piece, and then you're also gonna wanna start in the corner. So when you start, you're just using your hands to go ahead and mold it. You want it to fill the whole area that you outlined and traced. You're gonna have to push it and pull the dough, kind of like when you're making bread. You also don't want it to be too thin, but you don't want it to be too thick. So if you look here, if I take my pinky and if I put my pinky into it, it's about the depth of my pinky nail, and that's about what I want. So you're gonna take and you're gonna keep putting salt dough all over your whole map to fill the whole area. When you get over here into the Puget Sound area, you're gonna have to take smaller pieces because you don't want the salt dough to go into any of your waterways. All right, here we go. So I have my map created. What I want you to notice about it is that it's all pretty level. There's no really low areas, there's no super high areas. If I were to stick my finger in it, which I'm not going to, it would be about the depth of my pinky nail. You cannot see the board through. Sometimes kids it's too thin and you can see the board through. And then sometimes kids make it way too thick and it takes years to dry. So this is about how thick you want it. Also, you can see these little seam areas, and I try to blend them as much as I can. The other thing is you can also see where the Puget Sound is. You can see those areas. Those will end up getting painted, but for now we want to make sure we can just see the board through. The other thing you're going to notice is I still have a lot of dough left over, and that is okay. We are going to use some of it for the mountains, but if you have no dough left over, that probably means yours is too thick. If you have a large amount left over, like more than this, it means that your map is too thin. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at the rivers. So you notice that the Columbia River runs down through Washington, and then it runs on the border out to the ocean. And then you notice that the Snake River runs through the southern part of Washington, and it connects with the Columbia River. So how you're gonna wanna do the rivers is I'm using a popsicle stick, a spoon would work, or anything that is kind of small. So I'm gonna take a look, and I wanna match my rivers up to where they are on my map. So I noticed that the Columbia River comes down from Canada. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just lightly trace where I see the rivers coming down. And then I'm gonna go back through and I'll show you what we're gonna do. So my Columbia River comes down gosh, maybe not. I'm gonna fix that a little bit. Comes down, and it comes down to about here. So with my popsicle stick, I'm gonna just indent where my rivers go, but do you notice I'm not indenting all the way down to the board? You can see my river, but it isn't, I did not push down all the way to the board. So you're just gonna keep doing that with each river that we are gonna make. So I'm finishing up my Columbia River, and since Columbia River comes down from Canada and it goes across this, or down the state, and then actually if you look on our map, you notice that the Columbia River is the border between Washington and Oregon. So I only made my Columbia River come to here, and then when I go to paint it, I'm gonna just paint along the edge of my map. I'm not gonna paint on the board, but I'm gonna paint along the edge as far as it goes out to the ocean. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is the mountain ranges. And when you look at the state of Washington, the big mountain range, here is the Cascade Mountains. And so you notice that they run all the way from Canada, all the way down to Oregon. And they are over in closer to the Puget Sound than they are over here to Spokane. So how you're gonna do that is you're gonna actually take, and most of the dough you're gonna use is here. So if you're gonna take and kind of pinch up the mountains a little bit. So you notice how when I take little bits and I pinch them, you're gonna really know that it's the mountain range, because when we paint it, it's gonna be brown. So you should have enough dough here to make the mountain range. The other place that you're gonna make the mountains is over here on the Olympic Peninsula. You're gonna wanna do some mountains over here, and you're just kind of pulling them up and pinching them. You don't wanna do too many because it's not a huge mountain range. The other place is down here, the Blue Mountains that are in southeastern Washington. You're gonna wanna put a few mountains down here. And then we also are gonna put just a few little pinches up here, not as big. This isn't a huge mountain range, but this is the Okanagan Highlands. It's where the Rocky Mountains start. So when you notice, you can see that here is a mountain range, here is a mountain range. There are some mountains down here, and then there's some highland type mountains up here. All right, now your map is done. It is ready to dry. So you wanna find somewhere that your map can dry. It's gonna need a couple days. You wanna, when you transport it, you're gonna wanna pick it up and carry it like this. Don't tip it, because it could fall off. You're gonna wanna put it somewhere flat to dry, up on a counter or on a shelf somewhere that a sibling or an animal are not able to get to it. I wouldn't have it dry on the floor, because sometimes ants like to come to them, and mom and dad or grandma or grandpa would not be happy about that. This is what next week we will be doing, is we will end up painting it. So this is what our final product is gonna be. So you're gonna wanna stay tuned so that you're able to paint yours with us.